Hello, everyone. Okay, I'm so sorry. Hello, everyone. Good evening. Thank you all for joining us. Happy April. We are here tonight to.
Hello, everyone.
Oops, sorry.
Okay,
I'm so sorry for the technical difficulties, everyone. Um, Yes, we are here tonight to continue with celebrating Southeast Asian women. I know it is the end of March. We're in April now, but we need to be celebrating Asian women and the amazing work that they do even outside of the month of March. And really uplift their work that they're doing. So again, my name is Zhong. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I am a community organizer at Freedom Inc. Tonight, I'm here to continue talking about our Southeast Asian our Southeast Asian Liberation Shero Project. And again, it was the vision of Gajwa Va, who really I was thinking about all of these amazing organizers, activists, leaders that we honor when we're doing our movement work, but how many of them actually are not Southeast Asian people. And that though we've only been here for 40 years, we've done amazing movement work and need to be acknowledged, right? And how powerful it is to actually see people who speak the same language as you, who grew up the same ways as you did, right? And share that cultural identity. So it was really around identifying and really uplifting the work of Southeast Asian women who have made huge contributions to our liberation movement work. So this is our fourth week, and this week we are really focusing on how we are building power not only within our communities, but really shifting and thinking about powers in different ways. And tonight, we actually have one of our original Sheroes, Bo, who will be moderating, which I'm going to do a quick plug-in just to remind people that with our Shero project, we actually had developed T-shirts highlighting 4 Southeast Asian women Sheroes, Bo, Bo Gajua, myself, and also Chaya. If you look down here, you can see the link to go purchase a T-shirt. We are also doing pre-orders of posters, right? And each of the T-shirts feature each of the 4 amazing Sheroes and a quote of just like the movement work and how we should be thinking about movement work and what does it mean for us as Southeast Asian women to be doing this work. So make sure you check that out. So and again, all the funds right raised by purchasing these T-shirts will be used to put right back directly into like programs and leadership development for young Southeast Asian girls and queer and trans youth. So make sure you purchased. But yes, I want to introduce our moderator for the night, Bo, who is again one of our original Sheroes for our T-shirts, and I actually wanted to remind people about what the quote that's on the T-shirt for her, and it is: "As you do the work, you can't just show up on the surface. Your roots have to deepen." And I want to tell you all that when we were actually doing this project and we were thinking about quotes, there were a bunch of different quotes that were being offered up. But I remember this quote from Bo because I remember being in a training that she had facilitated and her saying this and as a young up and rising organizer, just how powerful and that quote was and stuck with me, and how I just wrote that down in my notebook. And I said, hold on, Gajwa, there's this particular quote that we actually need to use for Bo. And I went through all my notebooks to look for that quote, because I think the powerful and amazing thing about Bo is that she does so much for the community, and she's so humble, right? And I think what makes her humble and what makes her so approachable and down to earth is the fact that she truly lives by this quote of her, is that as she continues to show up and is recognized more and more as a leader, that actually her roots deepen, and her own growth with herself and with the community. And that not only do her roots deepen, but they also widen, right? That she is actually continuously every day developing and building young people, old people, right? Just bring in and making sure that the movement is accessible as possible to all people who want to make a contribution to the social change, right? To making this new world be possible. So I want to say that about her, because she is very humble. She doesn't brag about herself at all. And I also want to say, I just found this out from Gajwa, that she is actually one of the very, very first original refugee family strengthening domestic violence advocate in the state of Wisconsin. So not only is her work amazing in the political sphere, but that she is one of the leading folks in the gender justice Hmong movement work. So I want to thank her for that, and just her love for Hmong women, for girls, for young people, and just her love for the Hmong community, because we see that every day as she shows up, and the numerous Hmong organizations that she had co-founded. And not only that, but being a co-founder of Red Green Rivers, and making sure that as we're building and developing people, how are we staying connected to our roots and our arts, and supporting young women and girls who practice, right, Hmong artistry. So I want to welcome Bo tonight to really lead our conversation with our amazing 4 panelists. Thank you, Bo.
Thanks, Joan. You're so kind about that, and that makes me both really proud and also just really humble, because you are an incredible leader, not just for the Hmong community or the Asian community, but really our shared liberation movement. And I can't tell you how proud I am, because I've seen you grow and just continue to watch how you flourish and lead. And that is really, really amazing. And I feel like just joy and privilege, even though it's really difficult at this moment. So thank you, everybody, for joining us tonight. I know that if you're like me, you've had a very, very long week. There's so much going on in the world, and there's great pain right now, but also we are in a pivotal movement moment. And it's really all the leaders that you're going to hear from tonight, all the Sheros, who not only speak social justice movement language, but who live it every day, and who use all of their resources, including their truth, to be able to keep building community, and doing it in a way that is really both intersectional and global, and all of those ways that I admire. And so I'm just incredibly humble to be with them tonight, and to also know that even though March is done and International Women's Month is done, it's never late for us to celebrate our communities and to continue to get to know who's been doing the work in our communities. And we don't have to wait for a month. We should keep learning all year long. And what this moment teaches us is that we have to embrace our complexity. We can't pretend that we are homogenous, that we don't have unique qualities and experiences. And so I'm really grateful to have this project be lifting that up. And thank you, Kajo, for your vision, but really all of these incredible leaders that you should know and follow. So I'm going to just introduce them, and then I'm going to invite them onto the stage with me so we can have a conversation. And I invite you to listen, but to also ask questions. When we have people that we can bring together who are not just great thinkers, but they're great doers and believers in our own communities, it's the time where you get to ask a lot of questions that you might be thinking for yourself, right? Whether it's personal or whether it's community or movement. focus, these are the people you should be asking and talking to. And so it's a privilege to have them tonight. So with me tonight is Carolyn Tren, who is a board member of Mekong NYC, and she's also a candidate running for the New York City Council. Carolyn is running to be the next city council member for District 25 that represents Amherst and Jackson Heights in Queens, New York. For over a decade, I should say, she worked to make the needs of her community, to make sure that they were met by ensuring that her council member had an open door policy. This really took her doing, and she never saw herself being a candidate running for office, because historically these are the types of spaces that were not designed to support a working single mom to pursue public office. But we're so glad that she's thinking about it, and well, not thinking, she is running. So for all of us across the country, I want us to support Carolyn. And she's the daughter of Vietnamese refugees, and this means that she's witnessed her parents her mother work as a nail salon worker and her dad as a cable installer to ensure that they could have what they needed in this country. This experience of being raised by working class immigrants really has shaped her life, and we'll hear more from her tonight. We also have Sina Sam, who is the manager and partnerships and community support campaigns at CRAC. Sina was born in a Thai refugee camp and raised in Seattle as a daughter of Cambodian genocide survivors. She's proudly identifies as a 1.5 generation Khmer American. She spent over a decade organizing communities and doing advocacy work to ensure that the community's needs, including reproductive and environmental justice, as well as really supporting work to stop deportation. And then she also served as commissioner for the Governor's Commission on Asian Pacific Americans in the State American Affairs in Washington State. She was the first Cambodian woman board member that led their Civil Rights and Immigration Committee work as chair. She is active in her local community. There's so much more to say about Sina, so I'm gonna have her share more, but she really has been a founding mother of a lot of work to stop the deportation of the Khmer American community, and helped to co-founded the Khmer Anti-Deportation Advocacy Group that addressed the spike of immigration, detention, and deportation of Southeast Asians under the Trump administration, spearheading successful relief efforts and pardon campaigns. Her hope is that with more political visibility, collective power building, and understanding of communities, Southeast Asian Americans will be able to move from conditions of struggle, scarcity, and trauma to finding pathways to heal and rebuild that will not only honor all of our identities and history, but carve out a strong agency for younger generations to feel empowered, loved, supported, and proud of who and where they come from. Next, we have Ntsai Moa. Ntsai was born in Ban Vinai refugee camp and moved to the US at the age of 2. She has a bachelor's degree in human service management and a family development specialist certification from the National Resource Center for Family-Centered Practice and the University of Iowa School of Social Work. She's currently the Community Power Building Director at Freedom Inc., where she leads or co-leads a statewide Black and Southeast Asian coalition working to build community, electoral, and political power. She has over 20 years of experience working with low or no income communities, especially within the Hmong community. She started her work in community organizing in one of Madison's most isolated neighborhoods. And this is where she realized her passion for racial and gender equity. In 2018, Tsai was also elected as District 9 County Board Supervisor in Portage County, becoming the first Asian elected to any office in Portage County. She currently is serving in her second term as Board Supervisor. During her time at the County Board, she has co-created the Diversity and Affairs Commission, co-created the Census Complete Count Committee, and continues to bring racial and gender lens into local government conversations. And last but not least, we are joined by Nancy Dong Nguyen, who is Executive Director at Viet Lead. Viet Lead is an organization that empowers community through youth empowerment, organizing through a lens of social justice and anti-violence, health promotion and navigation, civic engagement, and community building projects. She has over 10 years of experience as an organizer, a nonprofit leader in Philadelphia and Camden. She has served on the board of Freedom Inc. And is on the advisory board of One Love Movement, which is a national organization working to end deportations in the Southeast Asian community. And in 2014, she was presented with the Catherine Bachrach award presented by the Philadelphia Coalition of Victim Advocacy for her significant contributions to the lives of victims in the city of Philadelphia. In 2015, Nancy was presented with the Women of Distinction Award by NOW, or the National Organization of Women, Philadelphia chapter. In 2019, she was awarded the 2019 Trailblazer Award by Bread and Roses Community Fund. And she serves on the Mayor's Asian American Commission and is currently a board member at the Philadelphia Area Cooperative Alliance. And she continues to organize youth and her communities towards a vision of community free from all forms of violence. So welcome, everybody. That was a lot to share, but you should know all of their incredible contributions and experiences. So I want to welcome Carolyn, Sina, and Nancy to join me. So we're going to start with having a conversation. And again, I invite all of our viewers to ask questions as you listen to the conversation. And then we'll pose them. We'll make sure that we get to ask some questions of this great panelist too, okay? So we're gonna start off and ask, what is it like being a woman in political work, and why does it matter? And also, if you could really talk about that in the context of patriarchy and misogyny, white supremacy, how does it show up? Chai, could you start with some thoughts on that?
Yeah, thank you, Bo. Gosh, being a woman in political work, being a Southeast Asian woman in political work, there are many beautiful things, but so many barriers and so many opponents and so many things that you have to get over. So I really thought about this. And I think, like, for me, being a woman in politics is like continuing to be unheard, even though you have a seat at the table. But having to be loud and to be bold and to be smart and strategic, to navigate a system that you were never privileged enough to learn about or to even know about. Um, Being a woman in politics, being a Southeast Asian woman in politics, is like having your family and your community consistently remind you, or having to consistently hear "King la kaya ilang tu," meaning if only you were a son. So knowing that regardless what my accomplishments were, it would never be enough, and it would never be the same as if I was a man in politics. But I always say, like, because I'm not a son, because I'm not a boy, I can be bold and I can be loud and I can do what I want to do. And that's what has given me the power and the passion to do this work, right? So I think, like, doing political work as a woman really means doing the work because we love our people and our community. We're direct, we're bold, and we have nothing to lose because we aren't there for face or reputation. We are there because our community needs us, right? And we've seen many times over and over again how different it is when Southeast Asian women electeds come into office and how we have moved um, and having hard conversations. Um, and then I think like being the first woman of color elected onto any board in a city full of white folks means like everyone has their eyes on me and um, many who are uncomfortable with me being at the table, and then many who are looking to see what kind of path I am paving so they can follow.
Mhm. Great, thank you, Tsai. I often tell people that, you know how people talk about the glass ceiling concept for Asian Americans. And I said, if you're Southeast Asian, it's like a brick ceiling. You don't even see what's above you, right? So it's not just a glass ceiling where you can imagine what's above you. You can't even see above you, and nobody is trying to pull your hands up. So I think what you describe is so true. And but also I love how you think about that, which is really that people have such low expectations, and so you're gonna bust out and do it anyway, right? Because you have nothing to lose. So that's really incredible. How about others? Anything to add to what Chai shared?
I mean, I want to just say that I really feel what Chai said about, being unseen. Really, like I felt that deep in my heart. And really, it's like being a woman in politics is really having to work extra hard to prove that you're even adequate to be at the table, right? And I think oftentimes as Southeast Asian women, our labor is the only thing that is seen, but not our opinions or our values or our labor, our work in that sense, and our analysis. So it's like working extra hard to even prove that you are at the table or deserve to still remain at that table. And I think it's important for us to take up space because we bring such a unique intersectionality to this work, right? Given really like what is happening to why there really needs to be a Southeast Asian perspective, Southeast Asian feminist perspective in politics. So I would add to that.
Great, thank you, Carolyn. Anybody else, Sina or Nancy, do you want to chime in?
I think I was thinking about the Vietnamese like term or like the Vietnamese phrase that may be similar. It's like trọng nam kinh nữ, which is like if if you have a son, like this person's super important, and if you have a daughter, like not so much. Just all of those sayings that we have in our language that we have to get through and like leave behind. The other thing I've been thinking a lot about is I totally feel what Carolyn was saying about what of our labor is seen, and how much emotional labor it takes to do this work, and to continue to do the work, and how much we're relied on for that actually, right? And so, yeah, it's been a really hard couple of weeks for obvious reasons. I just remember, like the week where the Atlanta shooting happened, right. It was like, the week before that, I was like talking to, two parents who had just lost their son, their Chinese son, Christian Hall, to state violence. I was like holding that space, then like working with the team to deal with and figure out how to stop a plane leaving with like 33 Viet folks. So talking to the father of the son on the plane on that Monday, then on that Wednesday, finding out about Atlanta, and then immediately supporting planning a vigil that evening, right? And then on that Sunday, the Sunday after that, like in 1 week, working with the team to figure out vaccine clinics. And it's like, that is the story this is why everybody here is so tired.
Yeah.
Because all doing that kind of thing.
Yeah. I think.
And I'm sorry. What I meant to what I wanted to add was, while we were doing all of that, one of our team members, on Win, was just like, man, like sometimes you just feel like men, they just want to kill us. Like what, even all of that. And like that was like the main theme coming out of that week.
Wow. Thanks, Nancy. So I think, Sina, if you don't mind, I'm going to start the next question with you, which is, and Nancy started talking about this already, but what was happening in your community that made you feel like you needed to work with elected leaders or run for office or, be appointed to a commission? Why did that make sense for you? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure, thank you for passing it over, and all the responses so far from Chai and Nancy and Carolyn, which it resonates with me in terms of the experience of Southeast Asian women leaders in particular, and a very uniquely gendered experience as well. I do want to thank Freedom Inc. for inviting me on here, and I feel like I would like to also just expand a little bit on what Nancy is going into when she just, courageously just revisited what a hard week our community and our leaders have been facing all of 2020, and then leading into this year. April is probably going to be it should be a time of celebration. It's New Year's for many Southeast Asians, but likely we will be continuing to carry on a lot of the labor and endure quite a bit of the violence that's been happening. So I want to take a moment to recognize that it's especially tough time and heavy on my heart and my thoughts. In particular, actually, right now is the Black community who are enduring like re-traumatization during the Derek Chauvin trial for the murder of George Floyd. And so when we're not only doing the work for our communities, we're trying to build political power, but we're building and have been building solidarity with other communities of color and other leaders and movements. And so for myself, like the love and visibility for our trans and queer family and friends who are the ones who often are leading this work and during the violence on the same side, outside of our community and inside of our community. So, this month is Domestic Violence Awareness Month for survivors, and that's an issue that is so intersectional in the advocacy work that should be a part of everyone's leadership in any community, because when we are in danger, the women leaders, the queer leaders, trans leaders who are carrying this work, then it is, like a real danger and step back from preventing for all of us to have the progress and the resources and the visibility and the support, the safety for all of our communities to thrive. And so I really wanted to name that in this moment. And disproportionately is affected is our Asian elders, Asian and Asian American women, and children, our youth, who are not going back to school in this time because of the fear of anti-Asian violence right now. And so that's just heavy on my heart. And I just really like to, lift up our most marginalized right now who are really feeling it. And so a lot of my passion and what brings me to the work of policy and immigration rights movement in particular is coming from lifting up those who are not at the table, who are leading this work and have been spearheading it and being able to center them, as well as I'm in a privileged position who, I'm cisgendered, I'm college educated, and not all of our community members are able to access resources and a place at the table. And so what's most important for me, even though we're the folks holding this and in danger at the same time, is that the mentioned by Chai is the love for our community, even though there is violence enacted against us and others who are needing advocacy the most. It's those who are most marginalized oftentimes who see the bigger picture and are in this in the long run to fight for our communities.
Thank you, Sina. I think what you're bringing up is really about, our movement in the API community in terms of, who do we follow? Because what you're all speaking to is not just a theoretical way of doing movement building, but the lived experience, and that how much all of you and all of us carry that right into the work. So thank you. I'm going to move on and ask Carolyn the next question, which is, what kind of power do electeds have, and how does that enable you to build the kind of world that you want? And I know you're running for office, Carolyn, so help people understand. You must see that this is a structure that holds some power, and that's why you want to be a part of it to do things. But also, I know you think a lot about co-governance. So if you can share your thoughts on that, that would be great. Thank you.
Thank you, Bo. So I would say, particularly in New York City, and I think like local governments in different municipalities maybe are different, but I think on the most basic level, our local government is the most impactful on everybody's daily lives, right? They're the ones that you can easily connect to when you have an issue. They're the ones that pass legislation. And in here in New York City, they're the ones that pass our budget, right? And in New York City, our budget is $9 billion, which is a lot of money for one city, right? And so with the budget, it is also really a reflection of the values that we believe in as a city, right? So if we believe in immigrant rights, are we then investing in programs and resources that benefit our immigrant community? And so for me, I would say, I always say that I was a reluctant candidate because having worked on the inside for so long, I really saw like the failures of our government. I never believed that government is the end all to our movement work. It is just a tool that we as movement workers and organizers use to advance our work. But seeing it from the inside, I really did also see how, the really like what people get turned off by politics. And to run and really to take up that space was because I felt like we needed to really change that. Like after what has really happened in New York City, we no longer can afford to maintain the status quo or continue promoting neoliberal policies and leadership, right? And for me, co-governance came really out of conversations with other organizers about the role of government, right? I think oftentimes we put all of our hopes and dreams into one person, thinking that they will make the right decision, right? And we put them on a pedestal and idolize them and treat them like a celebrity. And how do we take that back? How do we revert that type of idea and really elected officials are just regular people doing irregular jobs, and we need to make them like subservient to movements, right? And so co-governance is an idea of how do we keep our elected officials accountable to movements so that when they make decisions or when budgets need to get passed, they are doing that in partnership with community organizations and with organizers who are grounded in our working class communities. And so co-governance for this campaign particularly is really building like a committee of folks who are organizers. We're not working with only executive directors, right? We're working with people who are connected to our communities on the ground to really help us think about larger picture, right? And I think for this campaign, we've talked about this committee really being like the advisory. So everybody has a vote. If the vote lands against the council member, then the council member still has to go with the vote. And so I think experimenting with different models of co-governance, we're not going to get it right the first time, right? But I think having that type of experimentation is so important that we can put that power back to our communities and our movements.
Mhm. That's great, Carolyn. I think that's so helpful for people to think about, because sometimes we do put elected officials on a pedestal, and we think that that's if we've elected someone who looks like us, then that is the epitome of our power, and that's simply not true, right? Because those structures themselves are also sometimes oppressive. Well, they are oppressive, and so when our people get there, if they are not held accountable, sometimes, they can also get in the way. So I really appreciate that explanation of co-governance and why you chose to run, and how that really helps you move your movement work. I'm going to transition and go back a little bit, Chai. Can you just share, what do you mean when you say social justice movement? Help the audience understand what makes your work a part of a movement.
Yeah. Well, I really was thinking about what movement means to me, and it was really hard to put it out in words because I know how it feels like, right, to be in movement. But for me, movement is something so much bigger than me. It's so much bigger than just us here at this table, right? I see movement as change, and movement involves bringing people along so the work can continue after me. Um, and movement isn't just seeing, but you actually need to be able to feel the bigger picture and what it's going to mean to be free and what it's going to mean to have change, right? To do the work. Um, and it involves like everyone. I've been I've been in the movement and gender-based violence for a long time, and I've provided direct service. I've been in the streets. I've walked the halls of capitals, and I've even trained new advocates. But it came to me, like earlier mentioned, actually, political power is another strategy, and that's when I really thought, like, actually, yes, my part as an elected is part of this bigger movement to end gender-based violence. My part of an elected is that one of that strategy that we've been missing for a long time. And so my part of the movement now really is to join those who've been making decisions for us without us in mind, and who see us but still make us invisible.
That's great. Well, I'm just going to pause here for a minute because that's such a important point, and I wonder if anybody has thoughts just to help, all of us better understand what movements are. Anything to add?
Well, if I can talk a little bit about the movements that I've been involved in.
Yeah.
Is that
Please.
okay?
Mhm.
So, I think like I was really excited. I was really excited to be invited to the electoral organizing panel, and I'm super excited to be sitting with other folks who have run for office, have won office. I have not. Don't even think about it. But I really encourage folks, young people, folks in my generation. I really encourage all of us to be working and articulating our politics and strategizing in a way where our North Star is taking everything over, right? Like, what are we doing to take over the state of Pennsylvania? What are we doing to take over the state of Wisconsin? So I think, like, when I think about what has influenced me and who has influenced me, or what, like, I guess, what movements I'm a part of. I know that I got really interested in electoral organizing as a strategy when a comrade was like, asked me over beers one night, what is like the one political act that most people take more than anything? And I was like, I don't know, like march on the street. And he was like, no, it's vote, right? And it's like, he was like trying to say that, like, what is mass? Because really, for us to take anything over, for us to build power, we have to be involved in mass actions. And the most mass action, this is before, by the way, this is before, the uprisings of this summer. This is before Occupy, okay? All of that. This is like 10 years ago. It was voting, right? And then since then, I've been really influenced and inspired by Chokwe Lumumba in Jackson, Mississippi, the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party and that history, and the reality that it takes decades of involvement and decades. And I think, Bo, your quote really spoke to me of like when you are, when you're meeting with your community, when you're base building, it is about going deep, right? And so what would a 40-year investment in any one political location in Philadelphia, in Madison, look like? What would happen if we started to plan three like city election cycles ahead of us and started preparing for that? Or 3 state elections ahead of us and started preparing for that? 4 presidential elections ahead of us and started preparing for that as the left in the United States right now, right? And so I feel like the co-governance that Carolyn is talking about is really critical, and that actually all of our movements, and I see it and I'm inspired by it, in Black Lives Matter, in the Electoral Justice Project that is being run out of Movement for Black Lives. I see it in like all of these formations. Like the reality is historically the left has ceded the electoral realm, did not mess with it, was like, no, we're not voting, we're not messing with that shit for probably like 30 years. Yeah. Between like the, I don't know, like the 80s and into the 2000s. And it really wasn't until this last 10 years that I feel like I'm part of that like me also being involved for the last like 10 years and for the last like 6 years electorally has been about the left turning back around and being like, actually, no, this is the arena that we want to play in. And that we're not just playing, we want to win, and that we don't want to just win 1 seat or 2 seat. No, we are caucusing. We want to take shit over, right? And so I'm excited because I feel like it's not that it's totally possible. It's happening. I'm sitting here with like, Carolyn, you're going to win. You know what I mean? Like, and then you're going to inspire more folks. I mean, in Philadelphia, our next city election is 2023. And you better believe that like the social movement left in Philadelphia is planning for it, right? And so, and there's already all of these formations, independent political organizations like Working Families Party and other, other things that we're involved in, we should be in relationship with. So I feel like in terms of electoral organizing, like I know, I like threw all in 2020. I was introduced as the executive director of Viet Lead, but I'm also the co-director of APIPA, which is an Asian state-based organization in Pennsylvania. And I think all of us should just be experimenting with new forms of structures, right? Because the reality is the right has think tanks, they have C4s, they have, LCs, I don't know, they have like colleges, they have universities, they have like all the tools in the toolbox. And I think on the left, we've been kind of trapped in the C3. Like we're all like, the nonprofit industrial complex, and it sucks, and like we don't want to be about it. And it's like, and at the same time, the C3 is a tool, and there's all these other tools. And I feel like we need to get smarter about all the tools, because ultimately we want to win, because ultimately we need to bring our politics and practice our politics and then take shit over. And then the final thing I'll say is like mass protagonism. I think the other reality of like, I used to like have a lot like this fear, right, of power and of like, shit, I don't want to take anything over because I don't want to like replicate, replicate like capitalism, replicate patriarchy, replicate, white supremacy, sort of like replicate anti-Blackness because I haven't done the work. Okay. And so I think that's why base building organizations and our organizations that are doing long-term, deep political education is so important. And how do we, in all of our organizations, like support our base members in campaigns, practicing and unlearning, right? Unlearning like the patriarchy, unlearning the practice and practicing new things, like through, again, new formations, new organizations, cooperative organizations, right? So I get excited because I feel like this is my cup of tea. This is why I wanted to be on this panel.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think those are such, there were so many thoughts there, Nancy, in terms of one, just how do we I think someone said earlier, how do we keep our eye on the prize? What's our North Star? And you can't do that unless you are really finding a political home, no matter where it is, right, to build for the long haul. But also, as you do the work every day, how do you take the blinders off and understand that there are multiple vehicles, right? And if your movement is only in one type of organization or one type of action, you're actually not a movement, right? Like that's just an action that you're taking in support of something. But if you are trying to, be participating in movements, you've got to really think about the infrastructures that are there, and that there's multiple tools, as you said. So I really appreciate that perspective, but also just how to plan ahead, and with the eye on winning, right? I know that oftentimes we talk about in the movement doing work out of love and abundance and all of those things, and I think that's absolutely right. But we also have to focus on what is going to help us win, right? Because if we don't win, then the structures that we have now, we inherited, and they are just fundamentally flawed and oppressive to us, right? So then we end up just reacting to those infrastructures and the oppression and the harm that they cause to our communities, instead of working towards what it is that we want. So I really appreciate that perspective, and that those elements of movements that I think we often don't talk about, and we use the language, but we don't break it down for people, right? So, well, I want to just encourage our audience, to ask questions of our panelists too. These are people who are in the work every day, but also who really think about how to build power with community, and how to use the tools through electoral political elements that help us to win on the things that we really want. So I think I just want to encourage you. But anybody have anything to add? Otherwise, I will really get a little bit more personal in this next section of the questions.
I just want to add, can I just also add upon what Nancy and Bo were saying about like how we cannot perpetuate systems that are oppressive in these spaces, right? And that's something that, I'm really seeing in terms of like taking up space and being like the end goal is to win, right? And in that kind of culture too, how we perpetuate those systems. And so oftentimes I see and maybe it's just in New York City because New York City politics is so dirty. But we see other forms of like consultants, right? People who say the things that we want to hear, who use our language, but then are continuing to perpetuate these systems, right? We're not going to get anywhere if we're just going to continue to elect the same type of candidates or the same type of game, right? And so there's so many layers in terms of like taking up space, right? And something that I was just having a conversation with a comrade about, like, well, what are you going to do after this, right? And like, I'm going to go into consulting, but it's like, but we cannot then only like run these games and then continue to do these, continue these cultures of toxic patriarchy in these spaces if we're not committed to movement work, right? And how do you make sure that those systems in place are principled and committed? And that's something that, I've been really thinking a lot about as well, as a newbie to this field.
And can I also add to that?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I mean, Nancy, with all that base building history, like in terms of structures and how to approach it from a organizing as well as city state wide approach, that was fire. I so appreciated you laying that out so I don't have to say it. And I just want to add, in terms of taking up space, speaking to our community, I think it's really important because we are winning. I mean, we're 4 powerful women from the community who are moving a lot of shit. Apologies for the cursing, but like it is serious in terms of progress coming from a community devastated already by war and genocide and mass bombings, you know, our history. But to be in a place where 4 decades later, we have those in office like Chai, those who are going to win office like Carolyn, those who know how to get people in office like Nancy, and fighting for our communities. And for myself, I feel really fortunate that I have been trained. Like this is something that you can't just, you know, do overnight, and it takes political power building. We know takes time, and it's something oftentimes folks are turned off by, especially our community members who are already disenfranchised, who are already feeling like they don't have a voice, and voting they feel like doesn't work. But we know the landscape of it is that when the populace, when a population is disconnected from knowing what their voice is and their power is, that's exactly how structural systemic oppression works, right? It's playing out in a way where we feel like we don't have a voice, that our vote doesn't count, that the census isn't counting us. But when our leaders like us who are doing that work to educate and to really speak the language and recognize the cultural customs and nuances that speaks to our community. I want to speak to community members who really don't feel like they can either do what we're doing or don't feel like, you know, they know enough or they are equipped enough to be political leaders, to be involved in the political system. And that's just a false, you know, like a false type of conditioning. We have so much power if we really just connect with one another, support, and work out those systemic and structural types of Carolyn touched on, you know, replicating those oppressions within one another is so important to dismantle, to address, to understand. And that's something I just want to say, like, for those, especially like those who are not educated, formerly incarcerated, those who feel like they don't have a voice, they're not seen in our community, and the power is not within them to speak up or to make, you know, like to make an impact in our community or even, you know, like the wider mainstream political landscape. Is that I started out in the same exact place. And it takes, you know, it doesn't happen overnight, but it is important that you recognize that there are people who have been doing this work, such as us and others before us, that we've been learning from and have really gained that training from on how to be the leaders for our community. So I'm just speaking to community members, like if you don't feel like, you know, you can be like the next city council member or executive director or, you know, like power building community leader, you can do it. And it just takes really connecting with and understanding that who the leaders are and how you can support that work and build on that work.
I think what you are all talking about is that politics is the space or electoral power or political power is really the space where we know that our movement work is not formed on a clean slate, right? We have these systems that we inherited. And so in order to be our most powerful in the movement, we've got to engage. And if you don't believe it, you will know with the recent passage in Georgia in terms of how much they don't want you to vote, right? The act of voting, as simple as that is, people work really hard to make sure you can't vote. And then as you think about this work, you also lifted up, Sina. You don't have to be somebody who just wants to run for office. You can be engaged in lots of other ways. There's a question that's being asked about going there. How can non-citizens and people who are formerly incarcerated get involved in politics? And how can people build political power other than voting? So talk about other ways in which people can build political power. And anybody want to take that question?
Most political power has nothing to do with voting. That's number one. Number two, if you are a felon and you live in a state where felons cannot vote, which, you know, I forget how many states that is. Then I would get in, you know, I would check out in your local community who's working on changing those voter laws and get involved that way. And what that means is you don't have to be able to vote to get involved, to speak the truth about how, you know, your disenfranchisement is impacting your ability. You know what I mean? Like how your disenfranchisement is like, is unjust, right? And so so it's really funny because sometimes I like start these conversations with like, voting does not free us, right? Like I just flat out, voting by itself does not free us. But it's like you said, Bo, it is obviously an important part of the equation because otherwise there wouldn't be all of these laws and all of these ways people of color and, you know, and women and folks with felon convictions and, okay, I don't want to say women, that was like back then, but you know, I'm just saying like all these ways that people, elders, young people, there wouldn't be so many efforts to disenfranchise our people. Right. But I think in terms of just quickly, what is power building outside of voting? I think it's not an either or, it's both, right? We both have to be organizing our people who can vote to vote in the interest of our community. And our community includes undocumented people, folks with felon convictions, you know, like, and you can be on the doors or on the phones and talking to people about how they should be voting to support you, right? As like, and we have undocumented leaders, you know, on our team that are like, hell yeah, because you know what? If Biden got elected, that means they're a lot closer than if it was Trump, right? And that's just reality. But so that's like on voting, but on the other thing is like we have to be working in with community-based organizations or with community formations to struggle for power in your community. And what that could mean like getting involved in the next budget fight. The city of Philadelphia, if anybody's watching who's in Philly, the mayor is going to do his budget announcement on April 15th. And we have to be ready to push back because he's not going to fund our communities and he's not going to defund the cops without massive protests, like massive conversation, social media, presence on the street, presence online, etc. And so I feel like, you know, everybody who's watching has, you know, we can see all the ways that power, people power has erupted in this last year. Right. All of the different ways. There's so many ways, right? So voting will not free us, but we can get free with organizing our people, building power, and using voting as one tool.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I just wanted to add also, I just really thinking about like from an elected point of view and how lonely it is. Is actually electeds can't do shit without the people around them. And the people around them does not need to be eligible to vote. The people around them does not need to be educated. Electeds can't do anything without a good cabinet, a good support team. So we actually need to think about like political power in different ways than just getting elected or just actually showing up and voting. Like we need people in the county and city clerk's office. You can go work there. We need people to work for electeds. We need people to be advising electeds. And those are everything that can give an elected the power they need in order to bring our issues to the table. Also, commissions and committees of different local governments, actually, you don't even need to be eligible to vote. Right. And so don't always think about the elected positions, but think about all these other appointed positions as well.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's important to remember that some of our most powerful movement leaders were not elected people, right? From MLK to, many, many others. And so it's not, what we're talking about is that it's a really important element to work within so that we can dismantle the things that don't serve us, and actually leverage to support and build the things that are in service to movements. But you don't have to personally try to run for office, or that it's not just the act of voting. So thank you for breaking it down in such tangible ways. Anything else to add? Otherwise, I want to move on and ask more personal questions of each of you. Yeah.
I always just say that we need to infiltrate and agitate when we take those, when we get in.
Mm-hmm. Great.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I love that, Carolyn. I'll add that too. Infiltrate, advocate, and as well as making sure you're bringing those who are not at the table with you. Like, that is so important for me. And being a commissioner, my whole purpose in serving in that role was ensuring those who are formerly incarcerated from my community, facing deportation, our elders who have been doing this work for so long, but there's language barriers and other intergenerational types of steps that have been taken to build a community. And that's just hard work in itself to even push into the political arena. But we're right on time. As Southeast Asian Americans in this country, it takes at least 2 generations, usually for immigrants in this country, to build political power and have those being elected and a reflection of the leadership in this country. Mm-hmm. It takes usually that long, we know. So we're right on time in terms of just for almost 5 decades in. And then hopefully, as Nancy said, build within the decades in the future to even strengthen that. And just pulling along those who are not there is so important, because a lot of those who get into places of political power, often, if they're not doing that, they're not working for the movement. They're not working for our community, right?
Yeah. That's a great point, Sina. I often say that when people get into office or into a commission, you either become a bridger for your community or you become a blocker, right? Because if you are the first person or you are one of the few, you have the opportunity to open the floodgates for communities to come. But sometimes the system of white supremacy really rewards tokenism, right? And it makes you feel special for being the only one. It makes you feel special to represent your community. But in fact, when you accept those roles, you disempower your whole community, right? White people don't get into office and then move everything by themselves. They open the door wide for everybody else to be able to get their pieces and to be able to shape then everything that rewards white people, right? So and so I think that's a really important part, which is yes, go in and with a mindset of movements, but also when you get into that role, how you bring others along, and how you open the doors for others is really important too. So well, I know that we don't have a lot of time left, and people are probably interested in all of you and your lives, and how you prepare yourselves, right, to be working in politics. Because I often hear phrases like, "Gosh, I hate politics. Like, don't talk to me about politics," right? Or as if we don't talk about it, it's not going to impact them, right? And so I want to hear from all of you. How do you prepare yourself to do political work, right? What does that take? And Chai, for you, it's running for office. So can you talk a little bit about that moment when you're like, you know what, this is the right time, I'm going to run? How did you talk to your family? What made you want to do it? And then I'd love to hear from everybody about, you don't have to be running, but when you realize like, oh, I got to really engage in this system, right?
Yeah, I think for me, I thought about running for office for a long time. I just never knew which office. So first, it was really like thinking about which office could further the movement that I'm in or the work that I want to do. But I think like one thing is I got so much pushback.
Mm,
First was from the progressive or the so-called progressive recruiters who are recruiting candidates to run.
mhm,
Um, when I initially came out and said I'm going to run for county board, one of the recruiters actually said, "Well, we already have a progressive candidate for your district. Can you run for city council?" Or even like when I came to my home family about running, it was, "Well, why isn't your husband running?"
mhm,
And
mm,
so it was really preparing myself. The first thing was preparing myself to that I was actually good enough.
mhm,
And telling myself that there's no one better at this moment
mhm,
than me. Otherwise, I'd be pushing them to run, right?
mhm,
um, but I think like also being a movement builder and being that I knew I wanted to run my campaign very differently, I had to build out a campaign team that nobody else had yet.
yeah.
So I really brought together a young group of, a group of folks who've never ran a campaign, but was willing to say, we'll sit through all the candidate trainings with you.
Mhm,
And then they're thinking about how I was engaging folks into my campaign, right? Preparing and thinking that strategy. Because I also knew there were high chances that I was not going to win.
mm,
Like, and it showed because my candidate dropped out a month before elections and he still got 40% of the votes. So
Wow.
everybody who did not want this loud Asian woman in office was going to vote for an opponent who never even campaigned.
wow.
Wow.
Mm,
Um, and so I knew that, but I also thought about if I lost, who would I have brought into, um, what kind of impact would I have? So I knocked every door in my small district.
wow.
I did not use the van. We said it's possible to knock every single door, and I'm going to bring everybody along with me on this journey. If I lose, then I brought people into local government and interested in local government. And
Mhm,
then I also thought about what kind of infrastructure am I building so that I'm not the only one at the table. And so we built this campaign team that could help other folks run, other people who really wanted to run. And since I've been elected into office, my campaign team has continued to help, and we've gotten two other women of color into
mhm,
office,
mhm,
in different offices. So I
yeah.
think that's my big preparing to run.
Thanks for sharing that story, Chai.
Mm.
How about others, Carolyn? How did you prepare, or what are you still doing? Yeah.
How did I prepare to run? I mean, I guess like in my 12 years of working in politics for the current council member and never really having any plans to run, um, it was really, I think there was a voice inside of me that kept saying like, um, what are you going to do with the skills and tools that you have learned, right, over this past decade to continue to do movement work? And, as a single mom with two young kids, like running for office was not ever in my plan, and
Mm,
during a pandemic too, right? Um, and speaking with organizers who I was really pushing to run myself, right? Saying, like we need somebody who has been holding our government accountable, who's doing movement work, like run and I will help run your campaign, right?
mhm,
In
mhm,
those conversations, they were like, Carolyn, like it's really difficult to replace a good organizer, but because you have been doing this work, and you have the practice of amplifying community solutions, like you run and we will help support your campaign.
mhm,
And if it wasn't really for that encouragement,
mhm,
I don't think I would have ever ran, right? Because to me, it was never about me winning a seat. It was to make sure that this seat remained um, a position held by progressive leftist candidate or elected official. And so, it was a lot of soul searching really about like what I was going to do with what I had learned. How do we continue to amplify community led solutions, and then mentally preparing for like the long haul of really like balancing being a mom and then running a campaign. And so like there are days when it's extremely difficult, and I'm not going to lie, like there are times when I'm just like, am I like making the right decision, or my daughters are super neglected and I haven't like had a good time with them, you know, like good quality time with them. But I think really seeing like the model that we're trying to also implement, you know, we didn't hire campaign consultants or your normal politicals to run our campaign. It's actually community organizers, right? Who are already connected to our communities and have been doing the work that are rooted in this campaign. And so for me, it's like this bigger vision, right? Like what Nancy said, like we're doing this so that we can win, right? Is really what mentally prepared me to run. But you know, every day I don't want to say that like I wake up and I'm just like, you know, happy and joyful, because there are extremely rough, tough days, right? And this district is so diverse. It is like the most diverse neighborhood in the whole country. So like really balancing, you know, the needs of our communities in a way that like a lot of folks like aren't engaged with politics. And the vision for this campaign really was because power has been concentrated in this district in a very small block of the district that is mostly affluent homeowners, right? Who vote. But our district is so much more than those couple of blocks. So like, how can we use this campaign as a vehicle then to build power for our working class immigrant communities? Like that was always, and that will always be our goal. But we just have to make sure we also win so that we continue to remain that voice in the city council, not just for this district.
Great. Thank you, Carolyn. How about you, Sina? Share how you've personally prepared for the times in which you were, you know, entering the commission or going to work with electeds.
Sure, thank you. I would say, you know, oftentimes there is that tension, or we're put on a binary between like movement and organizing who are targeting people in policy, you know, Congress, legislators. And so it often feels like a relationship where we are on one side and policymakers are on another side. And that is the reality of a lot of the landscape. But how we change that landscape is also seeing ourselves a part of the political power and making sure we get folks into those seats, as folks here are doing, so we can my goal has always been to work as a bridge in all spaces that I can. And so when I came into this work, it was seeing myself as someone who could be a change maker in office. And that was part of the governor's commission, because I saw pardons was really needed in our community in Washington state, in particular, coming from a history where we've been dealing with deportation since 2002. And I was like a young college student, teenage mom at the time. And so I've been part of this work for a long time, but not until building out after college and building out my career that I was more strategic about where I could be a leader for my community and use my tools and resources that I knew I had privileges in, and leveraging that for the community. And so going into the commission was something I came from learning a lot from the Southeast Asian Freedom Network, who's been doing anti-deportation work for a long time, and just saw that opportunity in joining a delegation with them to Cambodia and meeting with the ministry in Cambodia, and just really thinking outside of what can serve our community during this time of like increased deportations, and no one even knows who Southeast Asian Americans are who are being deported, and it being an issue when we've had organizations who've been working on this, advocating for this for a really long time. And just so jumping into it, I just saw an opportunity where I was like, I'll run, put in my name in the hat for the appointment, and they saw, my credentials, and I happened to be appointed by the governor. And from there, it was just easy to connect the work that had been going on for 2 decades before me, to connect it to those leaders and to those community members and impacted families, and give them a voice. Because I'm not personally impacted. And so for me, that's how I joined and entered into appointed office. And from there, really moved to see that there was opportunity in the Democratic Party in Washington State as well. And so visibility is so important. I think Chai mentioned it in terms of her election experience, and that for me, I didn't see it as like my career, but there's no one else in Eastern Washington is where I reside and work, and being the first woman of color and Southeast Asian woman, Khmer woman, who is leading the Democratic Party caucus for Asian Pacific Americans in Washington State for the first time, was really because, no one else was doing it. And that's really how I came into it. I'm like, why not me? Why not you or anybody else? Because, and in reality, there's a lot of mediocrity. Chai already, mentioned it in terms of a person who wasn't even running for the office and got votes. Yeah. And so, really thinking if no one's doing it and you don't see it happening, find out why and become an agent yourself of change. It was really empowering for me to just see my community recognize what I wanted to do, and they just got behind me. And a funny story is when we were advocating for pardons, because that disconnect, that binary I was mentioning is so at the forefront of what people think of when they're like, I'm not into politics, is because of that binary. And we know there's not a single issue struggle because we don't live single issue lives, is what Audre Lorde said. And so when I was a commissioner, and we were having Cambodian families, elders who didn't, wrote their letters of support in Khmer, who were showing up at the doors of our legislator, who's calling when we had campaigns to advocate for those who were to be deported on planes the next day, when our community in Seattle was had raids up 279% this 2 years during the Trump administration. They, called on me to say, the Cambodian community is hitting us up. They're calling us. The governor is flooded. Do you know what's going on? I'm like, well, listen to them. As a Cambodian commissioner, I was helping with that advocacy, but because it's so accustomed to disassociate elected officials and appointed commissioners from the community and the organizers, they didn't realize I was one of the organizers. So it was right away I was able to say, yeah, Governor Inslee, the community is powerful and this is what they want. We should give it to them. That's great. That's my recommendation.
Yeah. Thank you, Sina, for sharing that. Nancy, I'm going to have you close us out in terms of just your own thoughts about, political power and the community and what it's been like for you engaging in this space. And what do you want our audience to be mindful about as they think about how they participate?
Okay. Cut me off whenever you need to, Bo. I just
2 minutes.
Okay. So I really want to emphasize that I am the product of, or I am because so many other movement leaders and organizers and mentors if I feel like so many hands on my back, you know what I mean? Kajwa, a lot of folks here know that Kajwa, I met Kajwa when I was 25 or 24, and has been a mentor ever since. There's so many, I think to be able to do this work. I was also joking because we were preparing for this panel, And then I think somebody was like, oh, Nancy, you should talk about this because you've been in this, like,
Yeah.
you know, one of the longest or something, not as long as Bo, but, you know, and I actually, this is not about like how long we've been in it, but it's like, I think about all of the folks who had to leave the movement because they burned out. It was so painful. They suffered too much. And I just was like, shit, like, what does it mean to last? Right. I really been thinking about that. It's like, is it because I've won a lot of things?
Right.
I wouldn't say that. Is it because, like, you know, I don't know. Like, I think what it is what we have to get good at is that we have to get good at being base builders and leader developers. We've got, what is it? I'm a good organizer if I can lead 10 people.
Yeah.
And I can develop those 10 people to lead 10 people. And there, and on and on and on and on. And I am here because I have a whole grouping of folks like Viet Lead. Like, I am so appreciative of Viet Lead, the community in Viet Lead, and the community around Viet Lead. It's so many hands, you know, like that are holding each other. And I want folks to know that that's what it takes, that you know, I am not superhuman. I do not want to be superhuman. I also am, you know, when Carolyn, you were talking about your kids, I'm also like a mother of two, and I want to be there as much as I can for their lives. And I know that, you know, it's like, you know, I think that the only message or what I leave for people is that, you know, if folks can like get involved and get agitated and want to do things, I just want to be like, pace yourself. And like, reach out, ask questions, you know, like in Philadelphia, I'm always like, folks want to talk to me, like, reach out, ask questions, join, be humble, you know, be humble, right? Like, take out the trash, enter in the data, you know, like, this is all of our work, right? And build up skills, right? So that's what it takes.
Thank you, Nancy. Such important reminders for all of us, right? And then I think I just want to take a few moments really to acknowledge all of you, because I know, having, you know, been in this, I'm the elder of the group. You can tell by the bags in my eyes that, you know, it's really, you know, those who suffer the most, who lead the transformation. But if we want people to stay in movements, we really have to both protect them and also honor, you know, their work, but also at the same time, you know, remember that we come from cultures that value elders, right? And that it's really in capitalism and in this culture where we replace so many people, and we think that there's no room for people if they are tired, or if they need a break, or if they, you know, are a certain generation. And when I look at the work, I'm so inspired by what young people are creating. And I think it's queer and trans folks and you know, women feminists, all of these people are the people who are creating a different vision for us, and that's who I want to follow. But I also honor that there are many who came before who had to break down doors in order for us to be even more bold now. So just like, let's keep sticking together, right? And I will follow all of you anywhere. So thank you so much for being here with us tonight and just sharing all of your wisdom and hope and ambition for our communities, but also to break things down, because you all said, you know, movements are about everybody, right? It's not just about some of us, and none of this is work that we can do alone. So I just thank you so much for giving us energy, especially in this time when it's been so difficult and hard. I know that I'm carrying a lot in my heart, and I feel very tender these days. And I know that all of you do too, because you pain for your community, and but you're so passionate. And what I want us to do is to get out of just being chronically empathetic, right, to situations, and constantly saying how sorry we are that people are suffering. It's not enough to be sorry. And this is the time where we really have the chance to do something different. And you heard the advice and the stories of incredible Southeast Asian sheros, and I want you to celebrate them all year, follow them, learn about them, and get to know more of our Southeast Asian sheros. So thank you guys so much. And I'm going to turn it back over to the Freedom Inc. staff who will close us out. I know you want to talk about t-shirts if you still have any left, and talk about what's going to happen next. Okay. Thank you, everyone.